Absolutely fantastic talk there, Tom. I can see you're really trying to make these incredibly obscure and abstract concepts kind of real to lay people like me. So I really, really appreciate it. For all those in the chat, I'm afraid because so many of you were commenting and talking and saying 8 and 12 and these kinds of things, I've kind of lost the bottom of the chat. So if you asked a really interesting question right at the start, I'm afraid it's disappeared off my list of text. But we do have a few questions, Tom, to kick us off if you're still there.
Yeah, sorry, I was just refilling my glass of water.
Don't worry, I just had a heart attack that I'd have to try and answer these, and nobody wants that. So a couple of people were quite interested in the Euler business, I guess.
Okay, yeah.
Particularly asking about, would it apply in higher dimensions? So Chris and Gorham both saying, does it apply in 4 dimensions, 5 dimensions? Are there similar rules with vertices, edges, faces, that kind of thing?
I believe so. I believe so. Off the top of my head, I'm not sure if it, I'm going to say, I think it's the same in any number of dimensions because we used it in a 2D example and a 3D example. So I don't see any reason why it wouldn't generalize to higher dimensions. And it's exactly properties like that we actually use and we rely on to understand higher dimensions. Because we don't have that visual anymore, so it's so important to have something to grasp onto. So as I said, I'm not in any way an expert on topology, but I believe that it should apply across whatever, or at the very least there will be some other equivalent formula for different dimensions.
Well, having admitted you're not an expert in topology, I'm now going to ask you a couple more questions on it. So, Garth was asking, he said, surely a circle has no vertices or edges. Again, just sort of quibbling with your definition there.
Yeah, no, so that is correct. A circle in its form, you could argue, well, there's 2 ways of thinking about a circle. I take the approach that, okay, so if we start with a triangle, which is the simplest 2D shape, you have to have at least 3 sides, otherwise you don't have a 2D shape. And then you go to a square, and then pentagon, hexagon, heptagon, octagon. You keep increasing your number of sides. To me, as you increase the number of edges, and therefore vertices, your limit as you go to infinity would be a circle. So there's 2 sort of schools of thought, right? Either a circle has no corners, possibly 1 edge, if you count all the way around. Right? It's kind of a philosophical question, or you could also say it also has like an infinite number of edges and an infinite number of corners. But either way, the idea of the Euler characteristic is that because it doesn't change when you do a smooth transformation, because when you do this homeomorphism, this smooth transformation, the whole point of the Euler characteristic is it doesn't change. So what that means is you can start with your circle where who knows how many edges or corners a circle has, but you can do a homeomorphism. So you're allowed to change your circle into a triangle. That is well defined. That is allowed under the rules, the mathematical rules of a homeomorphism. And so therefore, because the Euler characteristic doesn't change under that homeomorphism, the value, whatever it was for the circle, has to be the same as what it is now, having turned my circle into a triangle. And obviously for a triangle, we can hopefully all agree 3 corners, 3 edges, 1 face, the answer is 1. So that's what, it's not that the circle, there's any reason to count them on a circle and get 1. It's that you can turn it into something else and then it has to be 1 because it doesn't change.
So just on that, I mean, I'm raising my eyebrow of skepticism because I haven't actually done the calculations yet, but Raj Talak also asked this question earlier where he says, for example, you said about transforming a circle, say, into a triangle shape, but could I just equally transform it into a square or a pentagon?
And they all have the same value. Because if you think square has it's really cool because a square has 4 corners and 4 edges. A pentagon has 5 corners and 5 edges. So and all of them have 1 face. So it seems weird at first, but like no matter what you turn it into, if you can create the pointiest, spikiest thing in the world, but it's still going to get 1 in the formula because you have to. That's like how it's defined.
And the same thing presumably in 3 dimensions, because
exactly
I saw your animation of the sphere turning into a cube, but again, that could turn into a tetragon or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So earlier on, you mentioned about the link between cryptography and elliptic functions.
Yes.
Chris is asking that. Could you explain a bit more about that? I'm just going to put my hand up and say it's probably something to do with prime numbers. That's all I know.
I'm not sure it actually is to do with prime numbers.
So it's a different kind of cryptography.
It is a different time. It's a different type of cryptography. I believe it's conflicting stuff, but I believe it's meant to be more secure, which is why Apple decided to use it, for example, on their iMessage system, because they believe it's more secure than the traditional prime number cryptography. The way it sort of conceptually, the way it kind of works. So I showed a picture of an elliptic curve. So you get an elliptic curve, and you kind of think of it as you draw. So if you have 2 points on an elliptic curve, you draw a line between them, and your line will then intersect your curve somewhere else, which could be infinity. It's kind of cheating, but so if it doesn't intersect your curve again, you call it infinity. If it does, there's a third point. And then you take that new point and one of your old ones and draw a new line. And then you keep doing that, and you create this like sequence of points on an elliptic curve. And that generates like a sequence that's then used for encryption.
And it's hard to work backwards, therefore.
Yes, it's really hard to go backwards. Exactly.
Bit of it,
yeah, that's the cryptography bit. It's not too tricky to keep going forwards, but kind of like with, large number, take 2 primes, get super big number. If I give you super big number, almost impossible to get those 2 primes. It's a similar concept. It's something that's reasonably simple to go forwards with when done on a computer, but almost impossible to go backwards with.
Fascinating. Theo asked a question, which is, which of the solutions to these do you see arriving the soonest? Now, I don't know if he's referring to just these 3 specific ones or also the ones from last week as well, but I don't know if you want to have a prediction chart and write down what order you think they'll be solved.
Okay, right. Well, I'll start with these 3. Right, so for the 3 I talked about today. So I actually saw 3 years ago now a lecture by Sir Andrew Wiles. So the maths building here in Oxford is named after him, and he solved Fermat's last theorem in the mid-90s. I think it's about 94, 95, which at the time was the most famous unsolved problem in maths. That was the previous Guinness World Record holder for the most difficult maths problem, because that had been around for 350 years. And then finally he solved it. And one of the techniques he used to solve it was actually working with elliptic curves. So elliptic curves were really important in his proof of Fermat's last theorem. And I saw him give a lecture 3 years ago where he explained the Birch, Swinnerton-Dyer conjecture and talked through sort of current progress and where we are with that. So purely just based on that and seeing such a brilliant mind probably working on it, he wouldn't admit whether or not he was working on it, but having seen him do that, to me, I think of these 3, it feels like potentially the one that might go next. And then the other 2, it's really hard because Yang-Mills, like, I tried to give a feel for it. You've basically got to invent brand new stuff, and no one knows what that stuff is yet. So it's like, it's super exciting, right? It's like potentially could be as big as like coming up with relativity or quantum theory, potentially. But like, you can't really pin down when that's going to happen. You need, the Einstein moment, which you just can't predict. So
that's kind of similar to Fermat's last theorem, right? Because Fermat himself couldn't have solved Fermat's last theorem in the way Andrew Wiles solved it, because he didn't have access to the 20th century maths that he used.
He definitely didn't solve it in the way that Wiles did. I think it's right. There's a non-zero probability that he solved it. I'll say that. Right. I don't think you can say it was impossible for him to have solved it. It just, no one has since come up with it. But that
without using
without using the modern stuff. Yeah, he obviously didn't do it the same way, clearly, because Fermat basically had access to 17th century. So basically what we learn at high school. So if you have done maths GCSE, you have the same maths knowledge as Fermat did. So it's very, very unlikely, but not impossible. So I don't know between Hodge or Yang-Mills. It's tricky because Hodge is just so abstract that it's really tricky to even pin down what the problem is, in all honesty. And then for the others, maybe Riemann's because it's so big and so many people work on it and it's got that allure and everything. I think the more people working on a problem, perhaps you could say the more likely it is to be solved. P versus NP, that's a tricky one. Navier-Stokes, again, because I know a lot about that, I could see that one going in the next 10 to 20 years. There's been progress made, certainly like substantial progress made since the year 2000 in that one, for sure. And then, what was the other one? And then Poincaré's obviously been solved. So if I had to guess between all of them, I'm going to say Navier-Stokes will go next.
Okay, I'll head down to bookmakers tomorrow. So Bryn asks a slightly different variation of that question, which is he ends by asking, and which do you believe would be most directly affect our daily lives? Now, presumably if P versus NP is proved, then that renders lots of cryptography and other things obsolete. So that would be quite bad, would be my guess.
It depends whether, so if we show that P is equal to NP, then basically what that means is all of our current cryptography can be hacked easily. It doesn't tell us how to hack it easily, but like there would be such a mass panic because it's no longer as safe as we thought it was, right? Because cryptography with prime numbers, at least, actually, and probably elliptic curve cryptography, it works because it's an NP problem, which means it's easy to check, easy to put your two prime numbers together, get your big one, but really hard to get the solution of the two primes in the first place. So that would be a bit of a panic if they were shown to be equal. If they were shown to not be equal, which is what most people believe, that probably wouldn't have that much impact, because that would just say, oh, this is good. Everything we're doing cryptography-wise is actually a good idea. Let's keep doing it. So that one has the potential to have the biggest impact, depending on the way that it goes. Other than that, I guess maybe like Yang Mills could have, just because it could, maybe it gives us like new insight into this grand unified theory of physics, for example. Like, you know, like just the fact that it basically requires a brand new theory. Maybe it just so turns out that theory opens up the doors to other theories, and sort of all of physics is revolutionized potentially through that. And then I guess Navier-Stokes has so many applications because if we can understand mathematically more about what's happening, like from that you can then learn more about all of the applications. So it could help us build faster aircraft. One of my favorite applications is drug delivery in the body. I think I briefly mentioned this actually in the last talk. So obviously, because blood flow, the more you understand about fluid flow in the blood, etc., you can design drugs that move quickly around the body to where they're needed. So there's quite a lot, sort of perhaps indirectly, that by understanding the maths of Navier-Stokes, that could again unlock doors to brand new applications, or lots of progression in those applications.
Yeah, not just faster racing cars and
also that,
boats,
that, which is cool.
but drug delivery is something I wouldn't necessarily have considered. I have to say we're slightly running out of time here. We've got a few questions that are kind of a little bit more specific, like sort of asking just sort of explain little bits of maths that people weren't quite sure about. I think probably the best idea, are you happy for people, I wonder how people can contact you, Tom. Is there any information that I could find?
Would it be this giant thing next to me? Yeah. I was going to say, so if you go to my website, tomrocksmaths.com, there's a contact button on the menu, the landing page, and that just sends me an email direct. But I can promise that if you email me, I will get back to you. And also if it's something, if you just want to, drop me a message on social media, then it's just @TomRocksMaths on YouTube. Well, I don't think, you can't message me on YouTube. You can comment on a YouTube video and I'll reply to those as well. Or you can message me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. That's just @TomRocksMaths as well.
Fantastic. So just before I say goodbye, just a few things to flag. Just to remind everyone, the membership of the Royal Institution is open to absolutely everyone. You don't need to be a scientist. You don't need to have any nominations or qualifications. You just need to enjoy the work that we do and want to support us. And you get a nice membership card and lots of other associated benefits as well. Please, if you've enjoyed the stream, do donate the suggested donation of £10 or, £5,000 or whatever you can afford. That's be massively appreciated. Tom, we've already given you a nice plug for your website and your YouTube channel and so forth, but a few people are asking sort of recommendations for kind of books or other things where people could find out more about this. I don't know if you have any other media, YouTube channels or books or anything people could look at.
So very, very strongly recommend, and I was literally reading it today as I was fine-tuning my slides, a book. It's literally called The Millennium Problems, by Keith Devlin. So he's a mathematician. He's a British mathematician, but he lives in California now. He's based over at Stanford. So Keith Devlin, The Millennium Problems. It's great. It's like 200 pages, summarizes all 7 problems, and there's lots of appendices for the people who are really keen, where he has all the really in-depth like calculations, but then you can just read the book as just an interested person. It's a really nice balance. It doesn't sort of dumb everything down too much that you feel like you're not learning, but it's not so intense that you don't know what's going on. So that would be my main recommendation. And to be honest, that helped me a lot with putting together these slides. So thank you, Keith.
Fantastic, Tom. Well, thank you so much for your talk. I've just really enjoyed both this one and the previous one. And thanks again. And if people out there haven't seen the first talk, do check it out on YouTube, and do also check out Tom's channel and our channel. But that remains for me just to say good night to everyone, and thank you so much for watching. Take care. Good night.
Bye.